Thanks for attending our first Meet the Candidate Forum from the Urban League of Portland. This first forum is for the District Attorney for Multnomah County. My name is Julia Delgado. I'm the Vice President here at the League, and I'm going to be the moderator for tonight's forum. We just always like to start out by thanking our community partners who supported this event. We want to thank everybody for tuning in and for being civically engaged, and we want to thank the candidates for participating. As I said, tonight's candidates forum is about the Multnomah County District Attorney. So we're joined by District Attorney Mike Schmidt and Nathan Vasquez. Both candidates are here to highlight their campaign proposals and how they see their role as District Attorney and answer questions related to our community that are constituent driven. We're going to do opening statements, questions, and then closing statements. We're going to start in alphabetical order and then rotate through the section so everybody has an opportunity to go first. We hope that tonight will be an exciting and informative event. We also want it to be an orderly and respectful event, so any defamatory, abusive, profane, threatening, offensive, or hate speech are strictly prohibited. Candidates that engage in this behavior will be removed from the forum, and I'm just going to go over ground rules before we get started so that everybody is aware of what the plan is. We're going to ask each candidate to please remain muted when you're not actively speaking. This is really important for video focus, so please don't forget to do this. We have staff at the back end who might help out if somebody forgets, but please try to remember. Each candidate is going to start with a 1-minute long opening statement. And then when questions are asked, you'll have 3 minutes. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to respond. We're not doing rebuttals. This isn't a debate. This is just a forum to share your ideas. We're going to try to ask 5 questions, time permitting. We're starting just a few minutes late, so we'll see, and we'll let you know if we don't get to all 5 in the chat. Then we'll ask you to deliver a closing statement. We want you to be conscientious of time to the viewers at home and to your fellow candidates. So please, when you're within 30 seconds of your allotted time, please have an eye for the chat because you're going to see a note saying 30 seconds remaining, and we ask that you wrap up because it's really awkward if we have to mute you. For everyone. And then we'll let you chat at the end being like, time is up. And then if you do continue talking, we have to mute you. And we've done a bunch of these and it's always awkward every time. So I'm hoping to avoid it. So those are the ground rules for tonight. Again, I just big thanks to everybody involved and I really appreciate the candidates' time. So I'm going to start again with opening statements. So we're going to start with DA Mike Schmidt's opening statement. So DA Mike Schmidt, you'll have 1 minute to introduce yourself. Please go ahead.
Great. Well, I want to thank the Urban League of Portland and the coalition of groups that came together to put this event on. Thanks to my opponent, Mr. Vasquez, for participating as well. I took office in 2020 amidst a host of unprecedented public safety challenges, and I focused on taking meaningful action to meet these challenges head on. I built partnerships to address issues like gun violence, car thefts, and retail thefts, and we're getting results. I've also worked to address the inequities of our criminal justice systems. Now our new step court model focuses on Measure 11 charges, which have disproportionately sent young Black men to prison. We made a treatment court that keeps people in the community with supervision and gets them the help that they need to change. And we've increased expungements. This work is about removing barriers to career advancement and home ownership for people who have turned their lives around. My opponent, on the other hand, is a mouthpiece for a reactionary coalition that formed as a backlash against my reform work. He accepts money from Trump donors, and the Willamette Week sums up his platform as a return to the failed 1990s broken windows approach of Rudy Giuliani. Tonight, let's have a good conversation about our criminal justice system.
Thank you, DA Schmidt. And now, the DA Vasquez, it's your opportunity for an opening statement. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you so much to the Urban League. I'm going to focus on being positive this evening and really just tell you a little bit about myself. You know, I am the grandson of a Mexican immigrant, and I got to see his example growing up. He was such an incredible hard worker, and he was a community doctor who served his community, and he imparted that on me. And so that is what I have done as well. I've been in the district attorney's office for now almost 24 years. And during that time, I've had the opportunity to serve victims really in all walks and all aspects of our community. And some of those times have been representing children who have been abused. I've stood up against the Proud Boys when they've come to town to harass our community. And through all of that, I've worked tirelessly to represent this community and victims. And what I'm here tonight to do is to certainly answer these questions in a way in which we can all understand that we need to move our community forward in a safer and more healthier manner. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you both again for your opening statements and for being here. We're going to start with question one, which is going to be to DDA Vasquez first and then to Mike Schmidt. So how do you plan to address racial disparities in the criminal justice system, particularly in terms of arrest rates, charging decisions, and sentencing outcomes? You can go.
Okay. Well, thank you for this question. This is such an important topic for discussion this evening, and it's one that is such a real and impactful issue within our community. In the past years, we have seen just some really terrible, frankly, disparities. And one of those I also like for us to keep in mind is that in the past 4 years, we have seen really wild disparities among the victims of crime. In particular, we've had a year in which 41% of the victims of homicide were Black, and that's something that should never be forgotten in this conversation. And what I always want to come back to, though, is that with me, I have some very specific plans for how do we address this? How do we attack this kind of issue? And one is to start from a very data-based approach. I developed the strategic prosecution unit in which we use data to kind of carefully look at crime that's happening in our community. We look at how we efficiently work on that. And then on the back end, we're also very focused on how do we look at what is the impact we're having? Is there a positive when we're able to steer people out of the criminal justice system? And are there disproportionate results? We've had opportunities where we've used data to actually make some really important course corrections. And when I'm DA, this is going to be not an annual thing, but something that we look at month by month and really dig into these very important issues. And for me, what it really comes down to is not only using data, but working in the community. And that's something I've really specialized in my career. Both I developed a program called the Renew program that worked out in the Rockwood neighborhood to bring together the community groups in a really diverse neighborhood and work with law enforcement and to work with the prosecutor's office to make sure that their voices are being heard. And that's one of the most key things that we can talk about when we're in this space and having that discussion. And through it all, I have continued to be very dedicated to this. I help co-write what's called the MAPS program, which puts our district attorneys out into the community. And it really helps us to connect with community-based organizations, but also really have those voices out in the community that they desperately need to have access to our system. And so I'm always dedicated and looking for ways in which we can improve and do better in this space.
Thank you very much. Okay, DA Schmidt, it's now your turn and your time starts now.
So this is an issue that I've cared about not just on this campaign, but my entire career. When I got started, my first job out of college was as a high school teacher in New Orleans. And that was the first place I got to really see up close the school to prison pipeline. Most of my students I taught in the public schools were Black. And I saw what it was like when they were victims of crime, when they were children of parents who were incarcerated, and when they were defendants themselves. I saw what it was like to have a 14-year-old wrongfully arrested and spend a weekend in solitary confinement and what that does to their ability to learn in the classroom. So this is something that's really driven me for a long time. I started off my legal career as a prosecutor in the district attorney's office. I did that for 5 years, but I could tell that I wasn't making the kind of changes that I wanted to. And so I got out and I worked in the legislature on the Justice Reinvestment Program, which prevented Oregon from opening up a new women's prison, as we saw that women was one of our fastest growing prison populations in the state. And I've also worked on many other types of diversion and treatment court programs, funding them across the state in that role. And I brought that with me as district attorney. One of the things that I'm very proud of is our dashboards. For the first time ever, we have probably about the most transparent district attorney's office in the country. We worked with Florida International University so that anybody in the community can go on our website and they can see this data for themselves. You don't have to guess and wonder what these disparity rates are. You can see how our office is charging cases and what's happening in terms of results. I formed the Justice Integrity Unit. Before I was district attorney, there was no such thing as a Justice Integrity Unit. There was one deputy DA who half the time did some of that type of work. But we've really bolstered that unit. Now they are doing thousands of expungements every year. They went from doing MCDA used to do about 1,500 a year. We did 11,000 last year expungements. That's people getting their records cleared. We went to the legislature. We got the law changed. The legislature passed what's called Senate Bill 819 that allows me as the district attorney to resentence individuals. One of the criteria for resentencing people is disparity and past treatment by the criminal justice system. And I have a community advisory board that tells me what applications I should support. And on that board is people with lived experience and community members advising the district attorney. I think it's important that my deputy district attorneys go into prison and they talk with adults in custody, AICs, so that they can see for themselves, what it's like to be in prison and have those conversations. So this is something that I've been focused on throughout my career, and you don't have to wonder what I would do because I've been doing it.
Thank you so much. For question 2, we're going to start with District Attorney Schmidt, just to remind that we're flipping. So I'm going to drop the question. I didn't drop the last question in the chat, even though I said I would. So the right to be tried by a jury of peers is a longstanding benchmark of the American judicial system. However, race-based discrimination in jury selection persists today. What equitable measures would you put in place when selecting jurors? And DA Schmidt, your time begins now.
Well, it's a fantastic question. One of the things that district attorneys have done traditionally in Multnomah County for a long time is talk to grand jurors at the end of their service. And it's typical in Multnomah County for people to serve 30 days on a grand jury. And so one of the things that I do is, like my predecessors, debrief every single grand jury. And there's been something that comes up in every one of those conversations, and that's who's in the room. Looking around who it is that makes up our juries. And a lot of the folks tend to be white. They tend to be people who have jobs that will cover their lost wages while they're out of work. They tend to be retired or independently wealthy. So that right there, as identified by grand jurors, is a problem because it's not necessarily a jury of peers. So I've reached out to the Supreme Court. I've had this conversation in the past, but right now we are represented on a work group, an equity work group in the courts looking at this issue, specifically grand juries, to see if we can get the legislature to increase funding and the pay that we pay people to participate in grand jury service. Right now in Multnomah County and across the state, it's $25 a day. If you're serving grand jury in Portland, $25 is not enough to cover a parking spot and a sandwich. So, I mean, you really do have to be somebody who can afford to step away from their job. So my hope is through working with the Supreme Court, one of the justices on the Supreme Court and their equity committee, we will propose to the legislature in 2025 that they increase the wages that we pay to jurors so that we can have a more representative jury of peers. So that's just one way that we can look at these issues. Another area that we can look at is, when we're questioning jurors in voir dire and making sure that the questions that we're asking of jurors are not, trying to lead people in the wrong way or to strike people because of their race. Clearly, that's a problem and an issue and should never happen. But training on that, making sure that that's not happening is really important in our office. So continuing to make sure that those types of things, our deputy DAs are well aware that they should not be engaged in.
Thank you so much. Mr. Vasquez, your time begins now.
Well, thank you. As the only candidate here that's actually tried a case in the last, let's say, decade or so, because I do trials on a regular basis. In fact, I picked 2 juries on 2 separate murder cases this past year alone. This is a very important issue to me because making sure that we have a fair and just system that is where people can have trust in is vital. And what I've found is that this does come down to a matter of training. If you want to have good outcomes and good results, you need, attorneys in your office who are very well trained and professional in this area. It's something we're currently lacking in the district attorney's office is a full and robust training program. even though myself and some of the other senior attorneys, we do mentor the younger attorneys, and I take them into trial with me. I train them on a very firsthand basis, and I certainly host lunchtime meetings where we get together and we talk about these very issues. I have hosted multiple voir dire classes on this very topic. And I go in depth on things that, when we talk about this, what we're talking about is there's an old Supreme Court case called the Batson case, and it was recently kind of expanded in Oregon as well. And it's really critical because these are very important issues to have, that we have this training program. Right now, we have a large host of young attorneys in the office. We've lost many attorneys, up to, I think, 40 in the last few years. So it's important that with these young attorneys, they get trained, because I'm about very practical, real results. I want to have a fair and just system in which when we're selecting those jurors, we're doing it appropriately. And for me, I'm looking at how do I have a day in, day out impact? And the best way to do that is to have the best, most professional office we can that's very well skilled in dealing with these very particular issues. And that's what I'm dedicated to.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Our next question is about related to HB 4002. So knowing that the recriminalization of drugs was going to have a disparate impact on Black and Brown communities, how did you arrive at the decision to support it?
Yes, this is
go ahead.
with this one in particular. For me, I was looking at a situation where seeing such large amounts of individuals in our community suffering and dying on a daily basis, it was one where I believe that it was better for us to be involved than to put our hands up and walk away. Am I concerned about disproportionate impacts? Absolutely. And of course, that's where I'm going to use strategic prosecution throughout the office, but in particular in this area, to monitor that very carefully and closely. And it's one where, this is going to start with actually working to crush the cartels that are in our community right now. Sadly, what we're seeing is that they are using juveniles that are people of color to deal these poisons, and it creates a horrible situation for all, and it really sets up a bad environment for those that are struggling with substance abuse disorder. And my goal is throughout this is to meet individuals where they are. One of the wonderful things I have in my life is my amazing wife. She she focuses on counseling victims of trauma. And so she repeatedly reminds me, always meet people where they are. And that's something that I'm going to be focused on, is first starting at the very front point of this, which is deflection. And it's meeting people out in the streets, not just in the small core downtown, but throughout the county. And it's getting those treatment providers to pair up with law enforcement so that we can, at the very first moment, try to get those individuals moving in the right direction. And throughout the entire system, my goal will always be to meet people where they're at, to deflect, to move them into diversion programs, and to see how we can create a support network that truly helps people get into a situation of sobriety. And it is really about making sure that we're doing it in a very trauma-informed manner. Also, from looking at it through a cultural lens, making sure that we are providing culturally appropriate treatment centers and opportunities. And through it all, it is going to be about having a dedication that for the past 20 plus years, I've worked with individuals with substance abuse disorder, and I've always known that it can be a long and difficult journey, but it's one that I've been very particular about. And I put out a 6-point plan because I believe that we need to be invested in this. We need to be putting more resources forward, and we really need to be looking at how do we create a support network around those individuals suffering from substance abuse disorder, and how do we meet them where they're at.
Thanks very much, Mr. Vasquez. DA Schmidt, your time starts now.
Right. This is an issue that I've cared about for a long time. In fact, in 2015 or 2016, when I was the head of the Criminal Justice Commission, one of the things that I did is I had all of my staff read the new Jim Crow. And that was when possessing a small amount of drugs in Oregon was a felony, not a misdemeanor. That led to us doing data and research, working with the governor's office, and ultimately legislation that changed possession of a controlled substance in 2017 from a felony to a misdemeanor. And we led with the data that showed that people of different races and ethnicities use drugs at very similar rates, but who we saw being arrested and prosecuted and becoming felons in our state were very disproportionately Black and brown and Native. So in 2017, we embarked on that path. In fact, that ended up being some of the pattern for Measure 110 and doing the misdemeanor, dropping from a misdemeanor to having a violation. I supported Measure 110, and I believe that addiction is a medical issue and it should be treated in the medical system. But what I saw was that things on our streets, especially as fentanyl hit our community, and the dollars did not roll out as fast as they could have to support the treatment resources that we needed, that things weren't working. And so I rolled up my sleeves. I started working with the legislature last summer. We put out a proposal on what they should do to address especially open use on our streets. Ultimately, they wanted to go a little bit further than that. We worked with them to make a U misdemeanor for possession. So there was 180 days maximum sentence. The proposal on the table that my opponent supported was twice that long. But we also built into every step of the way a focus on ways that people can avoid the criminal justice system. So it starts with deflection and making sure that law enforcement has an opportunity to tell somebody, hey, you're not allowed to possess this drug anymore, but you don't have to go to jail. We don't have to do an arrest. You can go to a place where we can drop you off and you can get connected. If you do that, no prosecution. If that doesn't work, then it goes to the next step, which allows us as prosecutors, it's called conditional discharge, to offer people treatment again to avoid a prosecution. If that doesn't work, then we go to the next step, which is being on supervision. But I fought very hard to get automated expungement into the legislation so that within 3 years or after 3 years, you will automatically get that crime expunged. And ultimately, if that fails, that you can be released to serve your sentence in a treatment facility. So the focus for me on every step of the way was how do we connect people to treatment so that they can get on the path to being healthy and alleviate our neighbors' concerns about drug use openly on our streets.
Thanks very much. The next question, and again, we'll begin with DA Schmidt for this one, is how will you prioritize restorative justice practices and community-based solutions to address the root causes of crime and reduce recidivism rates, particularly among communities of color?
So this is something that I championed in my first campaign, have been continuing to work on, and a lot of the seeds of these efforts are really starting to bear fruit and to sprout. First and foremost, we have what's called our STEP Court. Our STEP Court focuses on Measure 11 crimes that we saw a huge disproportionate use of prison on for young Black men in our community, Black men ages 18 to 35. We're making up about 25% of the people Multnomah County was sending to prison for these crimes. So we looked at that and we thought, hey, can we do something that gets better results than prison, but also it keeps people in the community with their families working on treatment? To accomplish that, we actually had to partner with Volunteers of America and the Elliott Neighborhood Association. We entered into a good neighbor agreement with the Elliott Neighborhood Association for the Volunteers of America treatment facility there. And now STEP Court has been going for 2.5 years. Our recidivism rates are about half of what the recidivism rates are for people who go to prison for the same crimes. So we're increasing public safety. We're keeping people in our community. About half of our participants identify as people of color, as BIPOC. And the program has been so successful that actually the Elliott neighborhood now is advocating to our county commission for additional funding for our STEP Court program. So we're getting great results. We're saving taxpayers money because it's less costly than prison. We're decreasing disparity in our system. So that's just one of the efforts that I've put forward. Restorative justice has been another one. We've been working to get restorative justice off the ground. I've advocated to the legislature to invest millions of dollars into restorative justice programs. Multnomah County has been a recipient of those funds. We partner with local community-based groups that do the actual restorative justice work. The Restorative Justice Roots group is one of the groups that we work with right now. We've got about a dozen cases at various levels. Some have been successful. I went to one of their meetings. They had kind of a celebration a few weeks ago, and one of the victims got up on stage and talked about how meaningful it was to have a restorative justice option for them to agree to go through that as opposed to traditional prosecution, and how that really allowed him to ask the questions that a lot of times victims have but don't get answered, which is, why did this happen to me, and what can we do to prevent this from happening to others? So I'm a big supporter of restorative justice, and I want to continue to grow that program.
Thanks so much, DA Schmidt. Mr. Vasquez, it's your turn and your time starts now.
Yes, so I'm going to spend most of my time actually talking about restorative justice, but I do want to talk a little bit about the step court. So step court is an important part. It's something that myself and the chief deputies, we work hard to select the very specific individuals that go into that. And while recidivism the rates are important to look at, it is also very important to note that that's not a randomized selection of individuals. These are people that are selected because we believe that they're going to be successful. So I think it's not quite a fair comparison to the overall prison population because it's not randomized. It is a very selected population. Now, I do want to focus on restorative justice. Now, this is an area that is wildly important to our community, but it is one that is wildly underserved. So right now, the program that's been put forward by DA Schmidt, unfortunately, it's only served like a dozen maybe cases or somewhere in that neighborhood, but not many. And it's one where I could see so much opportunity for growth and so much opportunity to actually deliver this in a really meaningful way across the spectrum. There are right now, for example, we don't deal with restorative justice in the space of things like property theft. So in areas where someone's stealing a car, where maybe they're a young individual making a mistake, and this is one where I think there's a massive amount of opportunity that is wildly, just basically untapped at this point. And so under my administration, we're going to look to expand and actually make this deliverable throughout the community in a way that will serve the community in a much more meaningful way than just the occasional one here and there, and make it more of an everyday approach where really, you are going to see an opportunity to have this impact the community across the board, and particularly in the communities of color. Having that opportunity to do that more often will have a better impact on bringing down those disparate rates.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So this question will start with you. I'm going to drop it in the chat. Sorry. How do you plan to navigate the implementation of HB 4002 and ensure that it's done equitably, specifically when deflection is optional by county, which it's in Multnomah County, and then dependent upon the discretion of police officers to sort of offer it as a choice? And we'll start with you, and your time begins now.
Yeah, as I said, there's a couple of big components here. One is, having created the strategic prosecution program and having delivered that and really kind of built that out, it's something that I intend as DA to make office-wide, and really in particular, because I know how important this issue is to the community, to really focus that in when we start looking at how this is being rolled out. It does absolutely start on the ground level, on the street level. And it's something I prided myself with throughout my career, is that I've always been someone that I get my hands dirty. I get out there, I work with officers, I work with the community, and I'm making sure that that what's happening on the street, I have a good eye on and I have a good sense of. But for me, while having that as one component, it's making sure the data is bearing that out as well. And it comes in with both the training of officers to making sure that they understand that as well. And then also it is a key that we pair very closely with our community providers, because what we've seen with the bike officers, they've been at this for several months now, and I've been out with them for years, but in particular, I just have seen them here recently really get involved in the idea of bringing out treatment providers on the street. And as I said, for me, it's always about being very trauma informed and understanding that, what we need to do is meet people where they are. And of course, what is key and central to that is being equitable in how we do that. Because for me, equity is something that is a daily part of how I approach this job, because I want to see our community be healthy and vibrant, and I want it to be delivered in a way that we can all have trust and faith in. And so when I'm putting this out and rolling it out, of course, we're going to be using the deflection. That's going to be a part of Multnomah County. I think that's something that all of our community members demand and want. And so it's something that I've supported from day one. And it's something, when you look at my 6-point plan on my website, what I put out very clearly is building a support network, building community, helping those individuals, because oftentimes with people that are struggling with substance abuse disorder, what we find is that they're lacking a support network. it could be overall community, it could be family. And so it's about building that around them, helping them get to that point of sobriety that I desperately want to see them, and I know our community wants, just to see them get back to that healthy place. And it's something that I'm going to strive and make sure that is implemented in our county for the health and really for the vibrance of our entire community.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vasquez, and DA Schmidt, your time starts now.
Great. So, in helping the legislature as we were crafting House Bill 4002, we put a lot of focus on all of the different off-ramps that we could build into the legislation. So it starts with the deflection, but if deflection doesn't work for some reason, then it goes to conditional discharge. That was important because we worked with immigration attorneys, specifically from Oregon Justice Resource Center, to make sure that the language we were using wouldn't implicate any kind of immigration consequences, so long as the conditional discharge worked. If the conditional discharge doesn't work, then we move down the line to a traditional prosecution, but like I said, with a 3-year automatic expungement. If that can work for our community, that's going to prove to the legislature that we can do that for other crimes as well. So fighting for that to be in the bill was absolutely crucial. And then finally, if all else fails, having it so that if somebody does get revoked from their supervision, they can serve it into a treatment facility as opposed to in jail is another crucial aspect. I'm really proud to be supported by, the community groups that, spoke out and about their concerns around the racial disparity in House Bill 4002. Latino Network, Unite Oregon, Building Power for Coalitions of Community Color are all endorsers of mine. And we've had a lot of conversations about what is implementation going to look like. And the commitment that I've made to them is that we're going to form a community advisory board, and they will be members of the community advisory board so that we can in real time see data happening, see who's getting offered, who's getting contacted by police and who's getting offered deflection, and see if we see any disparity right there. If we see that people aren't taking advantage of deflection, let's look at the race and the disparity there and see what's going on. Do we need more culturally specific responses? Is that a reason why we might not have people accepting deflection? But we're going to track it at every phase. At deflection, we're going to track it at conditional discharge to see who's taking advantage of that. We're going to look at it for the people who aren't successful on conditional discharge or who maybe aren't successful on probation. And I commit to the community organizations and community groups that they will be part of that process of accountability to make sure that we're asking those questions. It's my expectation that police officers will offer people deflection. That is a crucial component of the bill and why I supported it. So I think right now we're having great conversations with law enforcement agencies, Portland Police, Gresham Police, and also the sheriff's office to talk about how is it going to meet their needs, because it's going to look different in different places. We have to make it accessible across the county, not just in downtown Portland. So working with them so that we can make sure it's successful and then tracking outcomes as we go.
Thank you very much. So those were our 5 questions. I just want to thank you both for being just absolutely perfect with timing. So we had time to get to all of those questions. So we'll close out the night with closing statements. We're going to reverse it. So DA Schmidt went first with openings. So Deputy District Attorney Nathan Vasquez is going to go first for just a closing statement. And you have 2 minutes for closing statement, just to kind of remind voters what we talked about or what you didn't get a chance to say, and your time can start now.
Well, first, again, I'd like to start by saying thank you to the Urban League and thank you to Mike Schmidt. I really appreciate the opportunity for this forum and this discussion. And what I would like to tell all of those out there listening is when I'm elected this May, I'll be the first Latino ever elected to be district attorney in Multnomah County. I believe that Portland's best days are ahead of us. And if we elect the right leaders, we can see a healthy and vibrant community that we all deserve. Now, we are at a critical time in history, and the time for change is now. We've had over 3 years now of rampant crime. We've had, just record homicides. We've seen businesses and residents fleeing our city. It's time for change, and the time for change is now. Before you, I offer a path that is one of hope and it's safety through collaboration, and it is the over 2 decades of experience doing this work day in, day out, that I believe and I know that I can deliver on the results that this community demands and wants. It is one that is going to be a community that is both safe and vibrant, but also one that believes in accountability and doing it in a compassionate manner. You know, I'm asking you to join me on our collective journey as we build a compassionate justice system where accountability matters, where victims are valued, and where safety is something that is enjoyed by all. I know that everyone here listening wants that and is dedicated towards that. So I'm asking you to please join me in this effort and mission. Thank you so much.
Thank you. DA Schmidt, your time can start now.
Thanks everyone for being here and tuning in. Thanks to our moderator, Julia, great job, and to Mr. Vasquez for showing up tonight. I began my career as a public school teacher in New Orleans. My students, like I mentioned, were almost all Black and low income. I saw how the criminal justice system failed them, as children of incarcerated parents, as victims of crime, and as defendants themselves. I saw how decades of mass incarceration perpetrated cycles of poverty and left children raising their siblings while their parents were taken away. I saw what happens to a 14-year-old when they're falsely accused of a crime and spend the weekend alone in solitary confinement. I'm running for another term because I know we need to do better as a system. We can hold people accountable and address the failures and the harms that the criminal justice system inflicts on people, particularly Black and other BIPOC communities. We can and must do both. Looking forward to a second term, I know that there's more work to do. I'm working on launching a brand new diversion program to help survivors of domestic violence move forward. Multnomah County needs to be a place where every woman, every child, every person knows that when they need help getting safely away from an abusive situation, the resources will be there to help them. We're building a new program to address homelessness. We'll partner with service providers to help people expunge their records and reduce homelessness and housing insecurity. We need steady leadership in the district attorney's office that can meet the challenges we face and move us forward. We can't go backwards. There's more work to do, and I'm ready to do it. So let's move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DA Schmidt. This kind of brings our forum to an end. I really want to give a thanks again to both of you for being here, for sharing your views, for responding to our questions. I also want to give a special thanks to our partners at LNS Captioning and at Open Signal. So they were in control of the airing of this forum on our social media channels. And we want to thank, of course, everybody for tuning in at home and the community partners who supported it. I really want to highlight the importance of voting. So the deadline to register in the primary is April 30th. And then primary election day is May 21st. Democracy only works when people vote. So we really hope that you'll get registered if you aren't and vote. Please remember that the Urban League of Portland is a nonprofit organization and that we rely upon donations and memberships to be able to bring you forums like this. Join our movement for justice and equity in Oregon by visiting our website at ulpdx.org. If you're able, we invite you to donate. Your support is an investment in our Black community and our robust wraparound programming that empowers communities and changes lives. So this was the first of a series of virtual candidate forums for the primary election. Visit us at ulpdx.org/2024 primary candidate forums to learn more about our series of events. And if anybody needs assistance voting or registering to vote during the election, you can call our staff at the Urban League and we're ready to talk with you. You can reach out via our website, social media, or calling us at 280-2600. So again, thank you both for being here. That brings our forum to an end, and I appreciate both of your time. Thank you.